Archetypes in Smash are weird. The ones you'd usually see in other more traditional fighting games don't really encapsulate what sets the characters here apart from each other. This is because of the relatively simple moveset each character has, which creates opportunities to fit multiple niches with just a few moves. Duck Hunt can go from the absolute lamest character who does nothing but hide behind his can of Axe body spray, to an aggressive combo character that gets huge damage in a scary good advantage state off a single hit. Terms like Rush Down, Zoner, Grappler, and aren't able to archetypify characters in Smash. I think that's a word. Instead, players decided to hone in on other somewhat unique aspects of the characters. These are generally based around things like their weight or fall speed, which are really important in the context of Smash's mechanics. Your goal isn't to get your opponent's life bar to 0 like in other fighting games, but to knock them outside of the stage's boundaries. The Blast Zone! There are a bunch of ways you can do this with every character. Things start to get interesting though when you take the character's abilities and traits into consideration. As an example, heavyweights are usually big targets without many good options and disadvantage, so combos end up being way easier to extend on them. On the other hand, they also die way later thanks to how heavy they are, which means stuff like this can happen. Some other archetypes that fall into this weight type of category would be floaties and fast fallers. Floaties are characters with a lower fall speed, which means they get sent higher when hit by attacks. Even though they die off the top easier as a result, they also can be harder to combo. Fast fallers are characters who, as the name would suggest, fall fast. They're easier to pressure off stage with a single neutral interaction than most other characters, and their recoveries are generally pretty bad. On the other hand, these characters have some of the fastest movement and an insane aggression game to go with it. That's just barely scratching the surface of all the different classifications for characters. I mean, cripes, fighting game character is its own mini archetype. That's how oddly specific we've gotten at this point in the game. But we're not here to talk about those characters. We're here to talk about these characters. The ones everyone loves to hate, the Swordfighters. Me? I just love to love them. We've all seen the "there's too many sword characters" posts for years, and I am very clearly in disagreement with that sentiment. Maybe it's because I swung anything and everything around like a sword as a kid. Maybe it's because I'm just a big fucking weeb. But I've played sword fighters in every Smash game and have never gotten tired of them. There's something about them that clicks with me in a way that the other characters don't. I want to try and figure out what that something or some things are. Maybe we can learn a thing or two along the way. Get a little informative with things. Also, as a disclaimer, I am just barely above average in terms of skill level as a player, so don't take what I say as absolute fact or anything like that. I'm just a scrub who felt like talking about his favorite characters. Alright, that's enough intro stuff. So, let's take a closer look. Let's start off by answering this really obvious question. I can already feel my massive sigh I'll get from reading "Ganondorf is my favorite Swordie" in the comments. In the absolute simplest sense, sword fighters are just characters who use a sword for the majority of their attacks. They can still have moves that don't use a sword, and it's a good thing that they do, since they get really boring really fast if that wasn't the case. So, no. Even though Ganondorf has 3 moves that use a sword in Ultimate, he is not a sword fighter. And despite Pit having a projectile and a giant punch for a burst option, he is a sword fighter because nearly every other move has him using his swords in some capacity. What's so cool about swords, though? They can smash, bash, and crash just like any other fighting style. However, they can also slash and stab, but that doesn't rhyme. That's to say, all of their moves revolve around disjoints. Disjoints are hitboxes that extend past a character's hurt box to widely varying degrees of length. They're moves that'll almost always win an interaction if your opponent challenges them without a disjoint of their own. Just imagine trying to punch a sword if you want a better idea of how it works. Sounds pretty busted, I know. That's why I play them. Though, as it goes with any game that has good balance, having such a powerful tool comes with some downsides. Many sword fighters have a pretty linear recovery that can be exploited easily once you figure it out. Some are definitely worse than others, though there are a few exceptions with actually strong recovery tools. These characters have a different weak point that can be taken advantage of, like a weight or fall speed that makes them susceptible to combos or an early KO. Most of them don't get much reward off of a grab besides stage positioning, and the grabs themselves are usually pretty bad. Characters with bigger swords tend to have slower startup on their attacks, meaning it can be easier to pressure them once you get a single advantage in neutral. The player has to keep these weaknesses in mind while trying to make the most out of their sword fighter of choice's disjoints. In a game like Smash, which rewards zone control just as much as creating vortexes with set play, having a kit centered around controlling the immediate space around you is huge. Fast or slow, big or small, anime or, well, just anime, I guess, they all benefit from the same core fundamentals. Oh yeah, fundamentals, every mid-level player's favorite word. Let's talk about those for a bit. The current concept of a sword fighter we have right now in Ultimate is way more refined and developed than back when Smash first started on the N64. The only character in that game with a sword is Link, and he's not exactly the most traditional sword fighter. It wasn't until Melee that we got a character that would begin to define the archetype and shape the designs of every sword fighter to come after. Marth. And Roy too, but Marth is more important. Sorry, not sorry. Marth's gameplay and flow are so well designed that they've managed to keep it fun and engaging despite being pretty much the exact same thing for the last 20 years. His central gimmick revolves around his moves being much stronger if they hit an opponent with the tip of his sword, also lovingly known as tipper hitboxes. This means that simply throwing out moves left and right won't reward you very much. Instead, you want to be careful and methodical with what attack you throw out and when, looking for that ever-elusive, ever-crispy tipper. How exactly does one go about that then? Worry not, friend, for I have just the thing. The Pyramid of Fundies. Much like the actual pyramids or an Italian grandmother's lasagna, we can build a game plan layer by layer, fundamental by fundamental, to achieve our goal. There are 3 particular aspects that are important for any sword fighter to master, not just Marth. The first of these is spacing. Spacing is the most important thing you have to learn playing a sword character. It's an awareness of the space you and your opponent can cover with your attacks. So naturally, it's important for characters all about using their disjointed range against their opponent. Let's look at Marth's moves to break this down a bit more. His sword covers the areas around him with a nice round arc on most of the attacks. In front, behind, above, below, he can control all of the nearby space without any blind spots. But there's not a move that covers everything all at once. Not only that, he's also still trying to hit whatever tippers he can. This is where spacing becomes an important factor. It's up to the player to gauge the positions of themselves and their opponent, then using that information to figure out the best option for them to use at any given moment. It sounds pretty simple, but when there are dozens of these interactions that happen in a single game, and being even the slightest bit off can make a difference between winning or losing that game, it's stressful as fuck.
Oh no.
The next layer to our pyramid of fun is movement. Seems like a no-brainer on paper. Like, yeah, of course you need to know how to move your character, otherwise you can't play the game. Though, much like everything I talk about on this channel, I think it goes much deeper than that. For sword fighters, movement can be an aggression tool all on its own. Think about what we just talked about regarding spacing. They can control the area around them with their disjointed hitboxes. Well, when your character moves, so does that zone of space they can control. With slippery and unpredictable movement, your opponent will have a harder time trying to figure out how you're going to attack them. This gives you more chances to open them up just by zooming and grooving around them. The final piece to our Millennium Puzzle is an interesting one: conditioning. Most everyone has probably heard this term used at least once. Something about a dude named Pavlov with dogs and bells, I don't know. The science is better used for fighting games anyway. For our purposes, conditioning is manipulating your opponent to react a certain way in response to an option of your own. If I keep going for short hop aerial pressure, the person I'm playing against is probably going to stay in shield while looking for a gap big enough to punish me. But if I'm conscious of what I'm doing and how it's making the other player want to respond, I can use it to my advantage. By purposefully leaving a gap in my pressure, my opponent might get overly eager to shift the momentum and end up getting punished themselves for that. This sort of thing is what the pros in the biz call a bait. One of the most common baits you'll see sword fighters use is called a tomahawk grab. The biggest threat when playing against a sword character is their attacks. So naturally, you're going to want to be in shield a lot. Their aerials are especially strong, as they're generally quite powerful and safe when they're spaced properly. A tomahawk grab takes advantage of this subconscious hesitation that builds up over a match by doing an empty jump towards a shielding opponent and immediately grabbing them after landing. In the ideal situation, they'll still be expecting an attack to hit their shield, and they'll be caught off guard by the grab. Of course, if they see it coming, it's really easy to dodge, but that counterplay has counterplay of its own. The counterplay to that counterplay has its own counterplay, so on and so forth. Congratulations, you are now the smartest Smash player in your house. All three of these things are equally important to the playstyle of any sword fighter. They build on one another from the bottom up, in a way that lets you tangibly point out the little marks of progress in your learning of the character. Spacing sets the foundation for everything, movement gives your spacing direction and puts threat behind it, and conditioning lets you weaponize the patterns you set with your movement and spacing by breaking them at just the right time. A delicious fundy pyramid that even Grandma would be proud of. Marth was the first character in Smash to really embody these ideas. In the 3 new iterations that have come out since then, the design teams took the standards he set and built a bunch of different characters that accomplish these same ideas in very different, very fun ways. What sort of fun ways, a hypothetical person might be asking? Well, if such a person does exist, they're in luck, because that's what we're going to be talking about now. If you've ever heard any of the hilarious jokes comparing every sword character to Marth, they've actually got a bit of a point, kinda. Any sword fighter to come after would be inevitably compared to the Tipperman himself. So Sakurai and Co. looked at what worked in his design and expanded on it through other characters. You can see similarities in how certain moves are implemented. Forward airs that hit in an arc that says screw you to anyone recovering, up airs that hit in an arc that says screw you to anyone landing, counters that say screw you to anyone attacking, basically just a lot of screw yous. The tipper mechanic is even used again for some characters. These are all relatively surface level comparisons when it comes down to it though. The biggest similarity, and honestly the only one that really matters, shared between Marth and the other sword fighters, are their reliance on fundamentals to create their game plan. Because of that, it's really easy to pick up and play any sword fighter once you get the hang of one of them. It's something I've found really fun, personally, since the similarities don't go much further than that, and every character feels pretty fresh and exciting to learn. Any sort of traditional archetype you're looking to play, there's a sword fighter that fits the bill. Rushdown? Pick Crom or Roy and hold forward. It'll work eventually. Zoner? What? The Lynx. The Lynx are pretty good zoners. Grappler? Ike is one of the only sword characters with a good grab game, and his nair might as well be a lariat. There's even a character in Sephiroth. No joke, this character is going to make people very angry when offline play is back in full force, and I cannot wait for it. I consider there to be a large variety of sword fighters, which is why I've never been able to agree with anyone who says there are too many of them. It's probably overly optimistic, but I'd like to believe that anyone who enjoys playing Smash can find at least one sword character they'd have a fun time with. I think it's a bit disingenuous to criticize an archetype whose defining strength is a use of the exact same fundamentals every other character relies on. Could you argue that every archetype's strength is a use of fundamentals? Probably, but I don't play those archetypes, so I'm not going to make that argument. And besides, that just means that Swordfighters have more in common with the other characters than you realize, in more ways than you realize.
And let's get some stepped up personal space up in this place.
The core design of space control seen in Swordfighters can also be seen in a lot of the other characters in the game. Take Wolf, for instance. A lot of his moves are massively disjointed, which makes his already scary pressure situations even scarier. He's got the hitboxes and frame data to be a ledge-trapping demon in the right hands like the strongest sword characters. And I mean, just look at his forward air and up air. These are Martharks, just with claws instead of a sword. It's not just Wolf. There are characters whose entire movesets are based around disjoints just like Swordfighters. The Belmonts, Ivysaur, and Evil Stevel are the main ones that come to mind. A disjoint is a powerful tool no matter what character it's given to. They can give characters opportunities in neutral that would be impossible otherwise, give them a definitive tool to deal with brainless aggression, or make up for weaknesses they might have to deal with. Learning how to master using them can be a lot of fun, but it's also just a tool, which means that it can work against you just as much as it can work for you if you become too reliant on it. That's probably why I've been able to stick with sword characters for as long as I have. There's always something I can notice while I play that I can improve or do differently to get a better result. And with all of the different playstyles within this one archetype, learning more about as many of them as I can teaches me a bunch of things about the game in general. Swordies are fundies, fundies are everything. Hello, and welcome to the end of the video. I'll try to make this as quick as I can since I know I've already taken up a lot of your time. First, this video was inspired, I guess you could say, by a bunch of other videos that a couple of other creators put out like a month and a half, 2 months ago at this point, about archetypes in fighting games. It's a really cool concept. There's a bunch of videos in it. I'm going to leave the playlist with those videos in it down below. Definitely check them out. There's one for Melee, there's Mortal Kombat stuff in there, there's team game stuff, any kind of fighting game you like, there's probably a video in there for you. Next order of business, I apologize for the slow uploads. I know I keep repeating this in every little update that I do, but things have been busy and hectic as always, so that's no different. But we did just pass the 1-year channel anniversary. It's been 1 year since I uploaded my first video, and I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who have supported me, whether you've been here for a year or for a day. Any support means the world to me, and I'm just glad that you're here with me. There is more content coming on the way. I've got a few videos planned, a couple things in the pipeline that I've been working on here and there. Hoping to have one out maybe by the end of this month again. I'll be pushing it, but I'm going to try to get it out by the end of that month. And then hopefully I can at least get to at least one video a month. Once everything is said and done here. Since I've been learning a lot in this past year, I think I'm comfortable enough where I can start tackling some of the projects that I was a little bit more hesitant on. And I'm really excited to get started on that. So once again, thank you for watching the video. If you feel up to it, leave a like, leave a comment, maybe subscribe and check out some of my other videos if you're interested. And we'll see you next time.